What if we could help solve Canada's housing crisis and expensive real estate market by simply unpacking a house at a job site in under an hour? Hey everybody, welcome back to Bald Prairie Real Estate. This is the weekly news recap where I go through the most interesting articles I found that week in the news. My name is Matthew Pfeifer. I'm a real estate agent in Regina, and that is my trusted assistant 𝗤𝗲𝗲𝗲𝗲. But let's give you a terrible joke before we get into the news. What do you call a zombie that makes music? A decomposer. If you have a terrible joke that I can use in a future episode, put it in the comments below. Let's get into the news. Let's start off by giving you a little real estate education and some terminology. You may have heard in some of the real estate press releases from your local real estate board about sales to new listing ratio. But what is that and why is it exactly important? So it's kind of self-explanatory. How many sales happen versus how many new listings. But why that is important is the higher the ratio of sales to new listings means how fast homes are being sold versus how fast they're being put on the market. The higher that ratio is, the more busy and active the real estate market is. Now, the theme of this week is going to be tiny homes and interest rates. We'll start off by talking about some tiny homes here. Now, this news article actually came out of my local newspaper, the Regina Leader-Post, talking about somebody trying to put a tiny home down in a small town just north of Regina, about 35 minutes north of Regina, town of Southie. And what they had is they had purchased the land and they had this tiny home built off-site and they were going to put it on their lot that they had purchased. But right before they were ready to do so, all of a sudden the town changed the bylaws and now there is a minimum square footage that was bigger than this person's tiny home, meaning they've got themselves a fight on their hands to be able to put the house they've already purchased and built onto the lot that they have already purchased. And this is, of course, something we're hearing a lot about in Canada recently, and that is municipal zoning bylaws making it very difficult to get more density and some of these smaller homes put on lots. And it's frustrating people, and understandably so, because it's also stifling innovation and the ability to get different types of homes built, more creative options, and more density. So this is just a local story that I had, but it's really frustrating for this owner who just wants to be able to put the house on the property that they bought. Next up, let's talk about interest rates, because on March 8th, the Bank of Canada did what basically everybody expected them to do, and that was hold interest rates where they are. They had been telegraphing this now since their meeting in January where they said, we're raising rates, but we're going to put a pause on this and see what happens. So pretty much everybody expected that was what was going to happen. And of course, now the Bank of Canada has said things and then done the exact opposite. But in this case here, they're still holding things where they're at. And it does make sense because the big metric that they look at, there are many, but the big one is inflation. And that continues to trend in the right direction, being down. Now, at the last data that we saw, the inflation rate was just under 6%. It was better than expected. The Bank of Canada's target rate is between 1% and 3%. 2% is kind of the sweet spot there. So obviously that means we have a long ways to go. So why wouldn't the Bank of Canada continue to raise interest rates? Well, if you look back starting in September and then go month by month and kind of add up where the inflation is at, it's about 0.7%. So when you annualize that, that gets us to 2.3%, exactly in line with what the Bank of Canada is wanting. So by those numbers, what the Bank of Canada wants, that 2% inflation, is what they're getting. Now, we're not seeing that yet because these numbers are year over year, not just month to month, looking at what's happened since September. But if this trend continues, the Bank of Canada will likely hold interest rates where they are. Quick little timeout here. If you love learning about Canadian real estate, hit that subscribe button for me so you don't miss another future video of mine, and like this video if you are liking it so far. This, of course, is the first time in nearly a year that the Bank of Canada hasn't raised interest rates, and Global News had an article out the very next day saying, well, what does this mean next for the Canadian real estate market? Now, as I do with all of these news articles, I'll put the link to this in the description below so you can check it out, as well as any other sources I use in these videos. Here's my thoughts on what I think is going to happen next. The first thing is, if interest rates stay where they are, that signals stability to both buyers and sellers. So you're going to see buyers come back to the market now that they're feeling there's more stability to the market. And hopefully we will see more sellers come to the market because inventory continues to be low across Canada. A lot of sellers are holding off saying, I'm not wanting to sell my house in this market, especially if we're continuing to see price declines. They're just going, I don't need to move. I'm going to not sell my house. And that is part of why we're seeing low inventory. So maybe now with some stability and some buyers coming back to the market, seeing more activity, sellers that want to sell are going to come back and put their houses in the market. Hopefully meaning we'll see more inventory in Canada. But overall, I think with interest rates staying where they are, or at least that's what the Bank of Canada says they're going to do for right now, if the market feels that way, you'll probably see more stability in the market. This next article was really interesting. It's a study done by Zolo. And what I thought was most interesting was their findings in this survey here line up really close to what I see just in my own everyday business. And they're specifically talking about buyers and kind of what they do and when they decide to go out and buy. So their report here shows that on average, buyers are spending 1 year to 2 years looking online at listings before they kind of get that house hunting process started. So that means engaging a mortgage broker and starting to talk with a real estate agent about the process. And I see that all the time. Buyers are out, they're looking online, they're looking at houses, and often they have a really good idea of what they're looking for and what's out there because of all that research they've done ahead of time. They'll sit down with me and they say, Matt, I'm thinking about buying a house probably in the next 6 months or so. And you wouldn't believe how many times that turns into 6 weeks or even less because they've done all their research. They're far more prepared than they think they are. And another thing that they talked about in this survey, it was not really a report, more of a survey, was that on average, these buyers are looking at 4 to 6 houses before they choose to make an offer. And this has been a trend I've noticed for quite a while. As we've had better online photos, 3D tours, videos, etc., buyers have a lot more information about the house than they did even just a handful of years ago, so they know the house pretty well. They're looking at fewer houses before they decide that this is the one. So while we're showing fewer houses, I'd say the quality of those showings has improved. Now in my own business, I find it's more like 6 to 12 before people write an offer, but that doesn't surprise me, that 4 to 6 number. So overall, I just thought this article was really interesting because it mirrors very much what I see in my everyday business. And now we come to the title article, Unpacking a House on a Job Site in Under an Hour. Now I got this idea for the topic right from a great podcast out of 2 agents in Halifax. It's the Master Keys podcast. I'll put a link to their podcast and specifically the episode where they talk about this company, Boxabl, because it's a really good one. They interview the founder of the company, but I think this is a really clever idea that this company has here. So what they do is they build houses in a factory. Sounds just like RTMs, right? RTMs are ready to move houses. The difference between an RTM and what these guys do, an RTM is built and usually moved on a large trailer, and they build a house as a whole. They're typically larger, although smaller than what you'll typically see as a stick-built house in a neighborhood. The problem with RTMs is, first off, a lot of cities don't allow them to be put inside the city limits. There's prohibitions on RTMs in a lot of neighborhoods in a lot of cities, but also just the logistics of getting RTM into an existing neighborhood is often very challenging. You've got tight corners and street lights and trees, etc. You often can't get them in. Boxabl does this differently. First of all, their houses are much smaller. They're about 375 square feet, so quite small, but they fold these up so they can be shipped much easier, and then they just unfold. It's really cool. Again, check out their website. I'll have that in the description below. So they unfold these in about an hour, and they're ready to go. What is additionally cool is that you can stack these or attach them kind of like Lego blocks to make a bigger house. So this, I think, offers a really clever solution to getting houses built in existing neighborhoods where size, you can't have a bigger house, so size is going to be very important, and getting them into these neighborhoods, but also the cost. They start at about $60,000 to $100,000, far more cost effective than buying a 300 or 400 square foot condo in Toronto, which is going to go for far more than $60,000 to $80,000. So really clever company here, and they're trying to get it so they can produce one of these like every hour. Right now it's about 1 or 2 a day, and they're trying to essentially build these like you would build a car. So I'm rooting for these guys. I hope that we see a lot of success, and this is, I think, a new and innovative way to solve some of the housing problems we have in Canada. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Now, if you want to unpack even more Canadian real estate, well, this is what the YouTube algorithm says you need to watch next here on Bald Prairie Real Estate. As always, please like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks very much for watching.